Hi again, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We are very happy to have you here with us today. So today in this webinar, we'll be focusing on engaging audiences online with tools that we have developed, the EnROADS Climate Simulator. And before we get started, I would like to guide you all to the control panel. So if you check the control panel, you can see a questions tab there. So please feel free to drop in your questions over there as we proceed with this webinar. We will make sure to get back to you. And just in case we are not able to answer you back at the moment, we would request you all to write to us at support@climateinteractive.org. So please drop in your questions about the game, about the workshop, or about this webinar itself in the questions box. Thank you again for joining us today. With this, I would like to pass on the webinar to my colleague Ellie Johnston, who is Climate and Energy Lead at Climate Interactive, and she will be the presenter for today's session. Thank you so much again for joining us.
Great, thanks so much, Bindu, and thank you all so much for joining us. And we're gonna jump into EnROADS and talk some about that. And I know some of you on the call are very familiar with EnROADS. I see in the list a few ambassadors. I think we'll probably have over 100 people here on the webinar right now, and we've had 2 other previous webinars in the last 24 hours that have had hundreds and hundreds of people on them as well. So it's just really encouraging to see all the people engaged and interested and curious about these resources that we have. I'm going to do my best to walk through the different options that we have. Feel free, as Bindu suggested, to write your questions into the questions box, and we will try and get to them as much as possible and try and speak to the needs and the questions that you have as we go along. So let's just get started then. So what we're going to cover today is some tips for how to engage people online. I'm going to talk about 3 main different things that we offer at Climate Interactive. So we have the EnROADS Climate Workshop, the Climate Action Simulation, and then the guided assignment. We also have some other tools out there in the Climate Interactive suite of things, but today the primary focus of these webinars is going through these three types of experiences that you can offer to people. And then we'll talk some at the end about some of the nuances of how we can talk about climate change and engagement amidst the current coronavirus crisis. So thank you all again for joining us, and I'll get started here by just doing a quick demo of EnROADS. And I'm going to turn my camera off here so you can see the screen more prominently, because I know not everyone here is familiar with EnROADS. So just real quick, what we might do in an EnROADS climate workshop setting is we could start by asking the group, the audience, some kind of question. And here, let me pull up a question that we could use. So one question that we've been using of lately is, what do you think we should invest in to address the climate crisis? And so right into the questions box, we'll test that out and tell us some ideas that you have. And then I'm going to flip it over to EnROADS and we can test some of those out. And I'll ask Bindu here in a minute to give me those, and let me go back over to EnROADS. And before I take your inputs, let me just orient you all to what you're looking at here on the EnROADS interface. So on the left here, we have global sources of primary energy. Coal is this darker brown line going up from the year 2000 all the way out to 2100. Then we have oil line here in red, gas, renewable energy, bioenergy, nuclear, and new technology there at the bottom. On the right, this graph is showing temperature change from the year 2000 out to 2100. We expect with this scenario that we would lead towards 4.1 degrees Celsius of temperature change by the end of the century. And we can change the graphs here, and we can look at other things, say maybe greenhouse gas net emissions, for example. But Bindu, tell me what's something that one person has written in. What is a type of investment that we might explore to address the climate crisis?
A lot of people are are expecting more renewable energy, more investment in renewable energy.
Yeah, so here on the left under energy supply, we have renewable energy, and I can move this to subsidize renewable energy, make it cheaper, or I can tax renewable energy. And so to have more of it, we'll make renewable energy cheaper. And before I move the slider here, think to yourself, what do you expect might happen if we had a really big subsidy on renewable energy? And again, this green line here, that's the renewable energy line. We've got greenhouse gas net emissions. Think to yourself, what do you think is going to happen? I'll slowly move this here. And so let's subsidize renewable, highly subsidize it. And you can see, so that by the end of the century here, renewable energy is subsidized and it's the dominant source of energy. Although we have other things here in the mix. And you can see that lowers greenhouse gas net emissions. And I'll take one more. And again, this is just a quick demo. I'm not going to sufficiently go through all the different pieces of the workshop, but Bindu, what's one other thing that you see people writing in about?
Yeah, John writes, phase out coal quickly.
Phase out coal quickly. So there's different ways we could phase out coal. I could just tax it here. And again, I'll do that. And think to yourself before I move this, what do you think might happen to this coal line here? And also what might happen to the other variables. So I'm going to tax coal. Watch that go down. I'll click the replay last change button here at the top, and we'll watch that happen again. So notice as coal goes down, what else do you see happening? See that blue line of gas changing a little bit, renewables and oil also changing a little bit there. So that's representing a very high tax on coal. Another way that you could address coal is you could go under into the advanced settings, and you could do something like adjust the % reduction in coal use and do that. I won't go there now, but that's in a longer, more extensive version of the En-ROADS Climate Workshop, an approach you could take. And the way this would work is we would continue, Bindu could keep synthesizing your different inputs, and we could test out. And so maybe somebody would say, how about let's stop deforestation? Somebody else might say, what about the energy efficiency of transport or buildings of industry? How about electric cars? What about agriculture and food choices? Let's reduce methane and the other gases. What about a carbon price? Sometimes we hear a lot about that. And you could see we can quickly get to 2 degrees. Somebody might suggest, oh, how about tree planting and afforestation? We do some of that, and we tip our scenario so that we're below 2 degrees. We could keep pushing it even further towards 1.5, but I just want to just demonstrate how En-ROADS works. This is what we're talking about as I get into some of the different formats that you might use En-ROADS in an online setting. So I'm going to switch back over here to the slides. And one other key piece of the workshop that I did want to highlight is we oftentimes ask people in the workshop, what would you love about being a part of the scenario that we created? So think about this scenario that we just created over here, where we have a big tax on coal, cheap renewable energy, lots of energy efficiency. What would you love about being a part of this future? You can write it into the questions box. Some of the things that we heard last week when we asked this question on one of the online En-ROADS workshops was things like less pollution and healthier ecosystem. It would be the most important thing to do in human history, or just no fear or guilt about something like choosing to have a family, or a more healthy, holistic society and happier people. Are there things that people have written in? What would you love about being part of a below 2 degree world, world in which we had addressed climate change?
Yeah, I can see a couple of responses here. So people are writing like more harmony with the environment, less suffering, less pollution and a healthier ecosystem, brighter future and more hope. I would have honored my grandfather's legacy.
Yeah, and so orienting people to the positive outcomes that can come from all of this is so important. Thanks for reading those out, Bindu, and thanks to you all for writing those in. So some examples of virtual engagement with En-ROADS. Just in the last week, I mentioned this, those quotes that I just showed you. Last week at this time, we had 586 different participants coming in from 73 different countries around the world participating in our workshop. If you missed that workshop, maybe this is your first En-ROADS webinar, stay tuned, because next week at the same time, we're going to do another online En-ROADS workshop. And so look for that, and you can register for that next week and join us. Here's some other examples of En-ROADS workshops that have been run. Some have been run by the Climate Interactive team, and others, maybe people like you out there, have already registered your events and run them. In the last 2 weeks alone, we've had events in the United States, Canada, Brazil, Israel, Italy, Thailand, Argentina, Germany, Australia, Austria, Netherlands, Norway, and Taiwan. That's great, and I hope that you all listening in will help us expand our geographic reach and reach even more people through kind of these online events. Here's one of our En-ROADS climate ambassadors, Molly Sullivan in Virginia, leading the En-ROADS workshop using Zoom. Here's another ambassador in Austria leading the En-ROADS workshop. One of our ambassadors down in Brazil played our world climate simulation game, and he used WhatsApp as a way of organizing the groups in the role-playing game. Here's Nikki Zimmerman writing on Twitter about her students participating in an event. Sean, Isaac, Tarek, Johanna, Yaron, and so you can see lots and lots of people around the world have been already starting to experiment and try out, like, how does this work as a way of engaging people? Many times it's educators and teachers, and maybe there are many of you all listening in who are thinking about your students and trying to find content for them. But also we have people in the business sector, as well as in more like nonprofit organizations and community groups that are engaging people that way. It really comes in a lot of different forms. I know people who are just, really care a lot about climate change and are hosting dinner parties, or just ways in which to hang out with and engage friends and family around climate. They'll do an En-ROADS event. So, and the three main ways in which we think about these different En-ROADS events are: one, the En-ROADS climate workshop. That's kind of what I just demonstrated. This could be done one-on-one, or it could be done with a group of hundreds and hundreds. It's pretty adaptable to different size audiences and also different amounts of time that you have. Then there's the climate action simulation. I'll talk a little bit more about that in depth, but it's a role-playing game that we have to have people play different roles. They get to play the role of conventional energy or fossil fuel companies and energy efficiency groups and climate activists. And so they can take on a role and explore what the positions of those groups and those different stakeholders might be in terms of taking on climate action. And then the third way we think about En-ROADS engagement is what we call the En-ROADS guided assignment. So this is like kind of a worksheet that could be given. We particularly think about it as useful within the education setting, where as a educator, you might not have the time or even the technology to be able to lead a whole En-ROADS event. So you assign students the guided assignment to do on their own time, and they can work through it at their own pace. These three things are kind of a part of this larger set of different ways in which we think about engagement. So at the very easiest level, there's just create a scenario, share it on En-ROADS, and here I'll just show you all how this works. So I'll flip back over here. Here's a scenario that we made. If you go up here into the upper right-hand corner, you can click share on Twitter, share on LinkedIn, copy the scenario link. So here, I'll copy the scenario link, and I'm going to actually just paste it into the chat, and then you all can check it out on your own computer. Here, I'm just typing it in. Here's our scenario. Okay, look for that. And so you can click on that link and share it. Or if you're on Twitter, share it over on Twitter. And you can say, here's a climate scenario built with EnROADS, and then tell the world about it. So we really encourage that. That's easy thing to do. Then the next thing you have is that you do kind of what you're doing right now, which is you participate in an EnROADS event. This webinar, of course, is more geared towards kind of training you in how to lead an event. It's not a full EnROADS event itself. But like I said, next week, excuse me, we will have some more events on the calendar that you can join. Or, and then, as I mentioned, we have the student assignment. You just direct your students to participate in it. Or maybe you think it's useful for your community group too. We'd love to hear about it if you're using the guided assignment. Then you can do things like you can invite an EnROADS ambassador to lead an event for you. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Or you can lead an introductory session of EnROADS and then direct students to the guided assignment. So maybe that's a little bit of what EnROADS is, how it works, that kind of thing, and then students take off with the assignment. And then you can lead the EnROADS climate workshop online, and there's different ways to do this. You can invite an ambassador or a Climate Interactive member to help you out. You can get help from a colleague, or you can just do it by yourself. And then kind of what we conceive of as the most difficult thing to run online is the climate action simulation. And that's just particularly because there are different breakout groups. And so you have to kind of use technology in creative ways to make sure that everyone stays organized. And it takes a lot more facilitation technique, but totally doable. We've been piloting it, and I would encourage you to jump into any of these. But before I go into more detail about what those different types are, I just want to start by giving you all some overall tips on how to do online facilitation. So the first thing is just go for it. I know sometimes you can think about this and maybe you don't feel like you're ready or that kind of thing. And I would say practice, but you're only going to get better by doing it. So get out there and get a group of your friends together, get your family members together. Maybe you are socially distancing and stuck in a house with some roommates, and you guys are bored of watching movies or whatever you're doing. Do an EnROADS workshop together and explore that. Some other tips. Many of you all, I know we've been in touch with several of you that have had events planned in person, but now they're online. Or many people have been using online software for a while, but for those of you that are new to webinar platforms, I'd encourage you to take some time to familiarize yourself with the platform you are using. We're using GoToWebinar today. Climate Interactive as a team has used this platform for many years. Zoom is also really popular right now, and that might work well for you. But I know there's a bunch of other platforms out there, and depending on which country you're in, the availability of these different platforms ranges. So make sure that you are just familiarized with the platform as you get going, and work with a host. So maybe you're not the most tech-savvy person, and then you can work with somebody else who can help you have it all figured out. So in the case of today, for example, on the back end, we have Bindu, and also Linda on our team is there answering questions and helping me manage some of the technology and all of the different features we have out there. Another tip, when you can, send out resources or advanced readings to people before your event begins, and also during the event. So even something as simple as like what I just did, where it is send you all the scenario so you can go check it out. That's the kind of thing, what we mean there by send out resources. Then the other thing I would say, as you're preparing to run your event, open EnROADS in several different browser tabs. So over here in my browser, I have the scenario we just made, but if somebody had asked a question, they're like, oh, I want to see what the impact of taxing oil alone would be. And then I could flip over just to this other tab I have where I've got EnROADS also loaded. And I could do something like test, okay, what's the impact of a very high oil tax alone. So sometimes that's helpful. And just as a thing to note, you can run En-ROADS in multiple tabs. Some more tips. You saw that I did this. My screen here is pretty well full screen already, but if I want to hide things even further, and I would encourage this, is go use this full screen button here at the top of the En-ROADS toolbar. That really gets rid of all the clutter on your screen, especially if you have a whole bunch of favorite pages and things that appear on your browser. Use that full screen mode just to keep everything as smooth and decluttered as possible. That's a key one. And then, let me see here, there we go. And then practice alternating between your slides and the simulator. That's another key step here. So you can see I'm running full screen mode, and then I'm using a computer that has a system where I can flip over and flip my screen back and forth. So I hope that's working well with the webinar platform today. But yeah, practice all these different kind of technological features, and it will make the experience so much smoother for your participants. Now to turn to some of the more facilitation tips, so less on the technology side. And this is about how you show up to a webinar and think about leading it. And one of the things we suggest is that before the webinar begins, really think about what your intention is, what the focus of the webinar is, and what kind of energy you're going to bring to it. It's a very weird thing. I am sitting in my house right now. It's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm talking to my computer. That's weird, right? It's not what humans have evolved to do well. I don't have a lot of feedback. I can't see your faces out there. So think about how you as a facilitator can just summon all of that intention and then just keep rolling through it. Know why you are here. What are you trying to get out of the whole experience? Think about the arc, particularly if you're leading something like the En-ROADS Climate Workshop. It's helpful to have kind of how you begin and you work through the different parts, and then how does it conclude? Where does the whole workshop flow to? And then choose to be engaging. So this kind of goes along with this weird setting where we don't know, I can't see your faces out there, but I'm doing my best to hopefully to keep you engaged as we roll through all of these different aspects. And then the other thing, if you're on webcam, look at it as much as possible. Look at the camera, and just remember too, it takes practice. And I think in these times right now, where a lot of us are very new to webinar platforms, your audience is going to be forgiving. So you can acknowledge up front, I'm still figuring this out. And particularly if you're working with a friendly group of, your local chapter of your environmental organization or whatever it might be, people will understand. But yeah, I would encourage you to practice, and just like anything, you will get better at it over time. Some other facilitation tips, and I hope I've been practicing these for you all, but slow down, pause, take a deep breath. I've got a glass of water here, I'm gonna take a sip, and so that way people who are listening, they can catch up. Sometimes there are internet glitches and things where the audio can get lost. I imagine tonight, today, wherever you all are out in the world, not all of you all speak English as your native language, so I'm trying to recognize that, and I hope that my pace is able to keep up with. Some other tips, keep it interactive, so use things like ask questions and using polls, or figure out ways to keep people engaged. Then when you're talking about En-ROADS, and I tried to do this earlier, but highlight where people should be looking. So when you're at En-ROADS, there's a lot of different lines going on. If you're new to it, it can sometimes be daunting and you might not know where to look. So you could say something like, look at the green line here. This is showing renewables. See how it's higher than the other types of energy? So that's important. Then hit the replay last change button. This is what it looks like. Again, let me flip back over to it. You can see here the replay last change button, and you can do that as a way to replay changes. Practice, practice, and then of course just do it. Some tips on answering questions. So Linda and Bindu are answering your questions as they're coming in, and I'll take some questions here in a bit. But first off, just acknowledge them. Thank you all for writing in your questions. They're great. And then try and keep those responses light and friendly, especially when they're coming up in groups where people are going off mute, for example, to ask a question. Point people to additional resources again throughout the answering questions. We'll try and guide you to places where you can read more in depth and where we don't have sufficient time to write out the full answer. And then for you, just like for us, we have a team of people that work to write in replies to different questions. Like we are here to support you in being an excellent facilitator and helping to make sense of the En-ROADS simulator. So if you don't know the answer to a question, again, acknowledge it, be friendly, great question. And then write in, please send it to support@climateinteractive.org, and the team there can get back to you all with a more detailed answer. We'll do our best. Sometimes it takes us a couple days to get back, but we will try and get back to you as much as possible. One other thing when it comes to webinar facilitation is there are different roles that people play. And tonight there are 3 of us. I'm playing the role of presenter, doing the primary amount of speaking. Then Bindu, she welcomed everyone as the host and organizer. She's also watching the chat and the questions box. And if we had any audio trouble or that kind of thing, she would be there to step in and let me know that something maybe wasn't working right. Then the answer of questions. Linda Chung on our team is playing that role right now. She's answering a lot of the questions with Bindu that you all are writing in. And then, but note, like this is a big webinar right now. A lot of times it's just one of us that will play this role. So for smaller events, one person can manage all of the roles. You only have so many questions coming in, and things like managing the technology might be something you just are able to do yourself. So don't worry about it if you don't have all 3 people, but know that it is helpful to have a couple people familiar with the technology that you're using and supporting that. So again, 3 formats that we're thinking about. I'll walk through these: the workshop, the climate action simulation game, and then the En-ROADS guided assignment. But before I get into that, let me do a quick poll, and we will take that and give you all an opportunity to weigh in. So the poll is, which form are you most interested in? So that we're just curious, are you interested in the climate action simulation game, the role-playing game, the En-ROADS climate workshop, or the assignment? And I'll give you all a few seconds here to fill that in. And Bindu, at this point too, how is everything going? Are there questions that I should attend to now, or keep going after the poll?
Yeah, I think we can go ahead with the poll.
Okay, great. And thanks everyone for voting. We're at 70% voted, 75%. Thanks for your participation. And I will give it just a few more seconds. Okay, that is the majority of everyone. And let me share the results. So what we find is that of the 100 of you that are here on the webinar tonight, there is a tie, look at that, between people who are interested in the En-ROADS climate workshop and the climate action simulation game. Very interesting. And then a smaller minority of you are interested in the En-ROADS assignment. That's great. That's helpful to see. And it's actually been different. So this is the 3rd webinar that we've held in the last day. And I think on this morning's webinar, 12 hours or so ago, we saw that the climate action simulation game was the most popular. Then 8 hours ago, there was the En-ROADS climate workshop was the most interesting to people, and now right now it's a tie. Cool. Well, let's keep rolling, and let me talk some about these different types. But before I do that, let me just remind you that you can do this yourself, and we definitely encourage you to go for it. Just do it. Take the steps to train yourself and watch our training webinars to become familiar in this, and know that there are 110 plus ambassadors that people who around the world in 28 different countries who have taken the En-ROADS training series themselves and have already run a couple events. Some of them are much more experienced. They've run dozens and dozens of events, but then some of them are new. You can reach out to these people. So on this page, you know, somebody like Eduardo, he's actually been running events for years and years with Climate Interactive's tools. You can read more about Eduardo and as well as contact him. His page is pretty fleshed out. In some of the cases, other people, they might just have an email address or a link to their LinkedIn page. But do check out the ambassadors page. You can find that on the Climate Interactive website. You go to About, and then you can click on En-ROADS ambassadors here and see all of these different people and see the different languages that they present in, and whether they might be interested in helping you facilitate your event. The other thing you can do is you can invite us to lead. We are a pretty small team at Climate Interactive, so there's a fair chance that we might not be available, but sometimes, you know, it doesn't hurt to contact us and see if we're around. Here's our Climate Interactive team. You can see Bindu and Linda, who are on the webinar tonight, but there are many others on our team as well. So the En-ROADS climate workshop, let me get into that. So I demoed a little bit of it. I showed you all some examples of the workshop that have already been held recently. One key piece of the workshop that we typically do, and if you're facilitating this online, you might give people a copy of this. This is the one-page En-ROADS guide to the control panel. Give people this in advance, or you could send them the link to it in the chat box, and we could do that now. I don't know, Bindu or Linda, maybe you all could grab the link to the one-page guide to the control panel and send that on over to people as a way to just guide them to what the different sliders are that we have. So some tips then on facilitating the En-ROADS climate workshop. So first off, we have recordings of the workshop that you can watch online. If you go to our En-ROADS page, you can check some of those out and look for the videos, or you can participate in one. Like I said, we have some coming up next week, and then we'll have some coming up around Earth Day, which is April 22nd. We don't have those on the calendar yet, but they will be coming soon. Send people the one-page guide to the control panel in the chat. Another tip, if you have a smaller group, turn the audio on. Let people interact. That's a fun way to get people engaged and help them stay involved in the workshop. For a larger group, it's usually not possible to turn audio on, so leave audio off and then rely on the chat or the questions box. Really depends on the web platform you're using, what features you have available, but the chat or questions box is an effective way to chime in and communicate with the group. If your platform has breakout rooms, then you could use them in groups of 3 to 5. We have been experimenting with this. The software Zoom has breakout rooms at a certain paid level. So that is one platform that we know of that has breakout groups, which has been fun to experiment with. GoToWebinar, which we're using tonight, doesn't have that feature. But that can be, what the breakout rooms is if you have, say, 100 people on your webinar or your event, then you could divide them and then people could talk to each other in smaller groups, which is, again, another way to make it interactive and keep people engaged. Then halfway through your event, send people, participants, the link to the En-ROADS scenario. I did that earlier. but you can share that and encourage people to share their link as you've created it. And then there's this question again. Ask people, what would you love about being part of that 2-degree future? And oftentimes what we do in the context of this question is we ask people to take a minute of silence and definitely watch the clock, make sure it's a full minute, and just to pause and enable people to reflect and think about the outcome of that and to help imagine how they might see this future possible as we create these kinds of climate solution scenarios. Again, here's some, what would you love about being part of a less than 2-degree future? Different people writing in. I would love to live with a humanity that made the impossible possible. Isn't that a beautiful image? Less conflict from resource grabbing, better ability to work together and cooperate, all kinds of different things. And then the next thing we have is the climate action simulation role play game. So I described a little bit of this. The climate action simulation is a group role-playing game to explore solutions for addressing climate change. So the way this works is that you have your participants play global leaders from sectors across business, government, civil society, and it's as if they're gathered together to negotiate a climate solutions plan to limit global warming. And then the group, you have these different teams, the climate justice hawks, world governments, industry and commerce, land, agriculture, forestry, clean tech, and conventional energy. They all need different ways of communicating together. So this is where the breakout groups come in, or perhaps maybe a WhatsApp group or some kind of way for the groups to message and negotiate their positions amongst themselves. Then they, as negotiating teams, then propose actions that you test in En-ROADS. So it's a way for people who perhaps it's great for students who maybe are just learning about different climate solutions and don't have a lot of opinions about it themselves. They can take on those different roles. It's also great for people of all ages. Here's some screenshots from a demo we did a week or so ago, where we had people playing different roles. You can see over there on the right, our colleague Caroline has added a background to her webcam where she's showing a polluting industry because she was on the conventional energy team. We're using the UN flag. So bringing in different elements to highlight the different roles in the climate action simulation. So some further tips on this. The climate action simulation game, I would say that in the online form, you have to be prepared to manage the technology and think about the ways in which people move in and out of groups. So that's going to take, give yourself 3 hours. This ideally could be done in 2 1.5-hour sessions. Maybe they're held in the same day with a break in between, or maybe they're held, one session on one week, another session on another week. I think it could work well either way. And if you do run the climate action simulation in an online environment, we'd love to hear about it. I feel like there is a lot of innovation that people could come up with in terms of ways to make this work well. Second, bring the drama, dress up, etc. Wear, as you're playing the role, one of the key roles is that the facilitator fills in the climate action simulation is as the UN Secretary General. So you could start your webinar, maybe you're wearing more casual clothes, and then you come in when you're playing the UN Secretary General in your more formal business attire. If you have fun with it, your participants will have fun with it as well. Third, you need to figure out the breakout rooms or the group chat features. Again, we recognize that's a challenge with the technology. There are software programs out there that enable this better than others, and I bet there are just creative ways in which to enable the group to chat and negotiate together. Next, send participants the guide to the control panel and other materials like the briefing statement before. Sorry about that, everyone. My computer decided to play some music. That is my bad. Let me get back into things. All right, the next thing on the list is to unmute speakers for their 1-minute speeches. So a part of the climate action simulation is for the groups, after they've negotiated in their small groups, to give 1-minute speeches about the policy or the action that they want to see tested in En-ROADS. So unmute them when they do that. Then next, just ask them to propose that in the chat or the questions, particularly if you're running out of time. Managing that will be essential. Then halfway through, you could pretend that the UN Environmental Program or some agency has leaked the current scenario, and you could send it out through the chat, so that way people could play with En-ROADS themselves. Maybe in the first round, groups aren't given access to En-ROADS. Then also, we just suggest to you that you check out our video that we have. So we have a recording of the climate action simulation that we ran online. I don't know, Bindu or Linda, if you can find that video and put it into the chat for everyone to check out if they're interested and see how we did it. And again, like I said, I imagine that there are many of you out there who have great ideas and innovations for how to do this even better. And we would love to hear from you. Make sure to register your event and tell us about the details of how you figure out how to do things like the climate action simulation online. And the final way in which we have to engage people is through this guided assignment or the worksheet. And there's kind of 2 ways to set this up. One is that you start by doing a demonstration of En-ROADS, or you could give people the 20-minute YouTube video that we have. So let me show you this. We have the En-ROADS assignment. So if I go under here, tools, here's the En-ROADS guided assignment. And if I click on this, you can find more details about it, but we also have a starting page that you could just email to your students or your participants, and they can just run from here. Watch this video. It's an overview with subtitles in English that walks through En-ROADS, what it is, how to use it, the different features of it. Your participants can watch that, and then they can access the assignment to fill in. And I'll just show you what this assignment looks like. So you can see here, the steps are all written out, and then as you go along, you're asked different questions, like how the whole point of it is that the participant creates their own En-ROADS scenario that limits warming well below 2 degrees. And so they have to create a scenario that meets these different goals, and then kind of self-assess how well they did in terms of addressing those goals, in terms of climate, in terms of economy, equity, the environment, and other elements like that. So then we also have 2 different versions of it. You can look back on the student assignment page and find a longer form or a shorter form and figure out what makes the most sense for the groups that you're working with. Do they have a background knowledge about climate action or climate policy, or do you want to just try and keep it simple? And the final point, we are piloting it. I would say too, if you're interested in using the En-ROADS guided assignment and you think you will be using it, right into the chat box right now. Linda and I were talking today about just wanting to talk with teachers or educators or people out there who are using it. We'd love to know how it's working for you. That kind of goes for all of these different tools. We're learning alongside you in terms of what works well online. And if you come up with some creative way of using En-ROADS in an online environment, we'd definitely love to hear us. Feel free to email us at support@climateinteractive.org. So at this point, I'll launch another poll. So in this one, I'm curious just how ready you are. Some of you will maybe on this webinar and you've already gone through different trainings and you're like, yes, I'm just trying to get the specifics, but I'm gonna lead it. And maybe I'll do it with others on my team, or I'll just go for it myself. That's one option. 2, some of you all may be joining, maybe you're thinking about leading it, maybe you're thinking about reaching out to an En-ROADS Climate Ambassador or to someone else to help you lead it. Others of you may just be learning. Maybe this is your first time on a Climate Interactive webinar learning about what En-ROADS is and the potential there. You're not yet ready to lead something or something else. And if you select other, feel free to write that into the questions box. As you all are voting, I see results coming in. Thank you very much. And I will close the poll here and share the results. Let's see. So what we see here is most of you all are just learning at this point and thinking about these tools and what we've got to offer. And then a good portion of you are just ready to lead it. That's exciting to hear. And yeah, hope you have a great audience and a great experience using it. And then a few of you all thinking about inviting others or have some other plans. Thank you all. And let me pause here. Bindu, are you seeing any questions coming in that I should address just briefly right now? I will take a lot more questions at the end, but just if there is anything that comes to mind or anything else that I maybe moved too fast through that I should go back and explain. If not, I'll keep rolling. So one very important thing is for anytime you run an event with En-ROADS, we really encourage you, please register your event. This is helpful to us in continuing to provide you all with all of these materials, the simulator, and webinars like this for free. We need to be able to show our funders that there are people out there who are using these tools. So please register your event, even if it's not public or you're just using it in a classroom setting, or maybe you're just using it in your living room with 3 other people, or you're doing an online event with just a couple friends. Like, register your event. It's very helpful for us. And if you're registering your event and it's an online event, and you're asked about the location, I'd encourage you just to set the location as where you're speaking from, even if you're engaging an audience that's all over the world, like we are right now. One other thing too, I will say is if you go to support.climateinteractive.org, I'll show you all this. You can find our support page. And that is where you can use our forum. So we have a forum in which lots of people are able to write into and have different topics. So for example, I mentioned earlier, like looking for other facilitators and users. So you can see over here some forum topics, and you can connect with others and find people in different regions and areas. There have been people who've chimed in from all different corners of the world. If you don't see your region, you can start another thread. There's also topics in the forum about specific applications of En-ROADS. Here's a thread about using En-ROADS with 10 to 15-year-olds and different questions like that. So you can join here, you can start a new topic and participate. Or if you want to write to us and ask a more specific question rather than posting it publicly on the forum, you can open a support ticket and fill that in and select new support ticket, and then that will go to our team that's on the support side answering different questions like that. So I do want to make sure that resource is out there. That's just support.climateinteractive.org. You can also access that from our homepage, but that is out there. So we just have a minute left. We haven't gotten into the questions, but I will say, it's been an hour. If you need to roll on with the rest of your day or your evening, wherever you are, feel free to do that and sign off. However, we can stick around for some questions, and I'll try and get to any of the questions that perhaps Bindu and Linda and Cassandra weren't able to address in the questions box on that. And I will say, Bindu, do you see any good questions that I should tackle just right now?
Yeah, I think some people were asking the difference between 𝐶ERORS and EnROADS because looks like a lot of people are familiar with old climate simulation and many might have run it already. So if you can just re-emphasize the difference between two.
Yeah, sure. And so let me do that. I'm going to go to here on the Climate Interactive website. So we have 𝐶EROADS and EnROADS. Today, I've been showing you EnROADS. This is a tool that divides the world up into different sectors, different types of solutions, coal taxes, energy efficiency, that kind of thing. Our other tool, 𝐶EROADS, focuses on the same question of how do we limit warming to below 2 degrees, but instead of dividing the world by different economic sectors, the world's divided into geographic regions. So there you can test questions like when should China peak their emissions? And when do the other developing countries peak their emissions and then reduce their emissions to create a world that's less than 2 degrees? So that is great as a way to simulate what the UN climate change negotiations are like, where you have different countries playing parties working to create a global deal on climate change. And the role-playing game that we have that is called the World Climate Simulation. That's been used for many years. It's great to hear that some of you out there are familiar with it. And that could also be run online. And if you are interested in the World Climate Simulation, we have a webinar coming up. Let me see if I can get to the webinars page later this month. So on April 29th, you can register how to facilitate a world climate simulation virtually. That is coming up later in the month in a few weeks. If you want more tips, it'll be along the same lines as what we have done today, where we've gone through what are some of the ways in which to think about how to do this. We're going to do that in partnership with our partners at the University of Massachusetts Lowell Climate Change Initiative. And other questions?
Yes, there are a couple of related questions on age group for which this is particularly suited. So also there are questions like, is it suitable for middle school students and for differently abled students?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let me get back to the three different types. I could, and I would say that the En-ROADS Climate Workshop can be used with younger students. One of the things to be sensitive to as you think about working with middle school, say in that 10 to 15-year-old age range, is just the vocabulary that's used. And so think about some of the extra steps that you might take as an educator if you're using this tool with them, and being sensitive that you might have to spend a little more time explaining what different things are, or work to put things into different terms. So for example, on the simulator, you might have something like afforestation, and then you as an educator would tell the kids, well, this is really about tree planting. And that works, of course, for people of all ages too. Not everyone knows what afforestation is, but I would say go for it. Let us know how it goes. You also might have seen over on the forum, when I showed you all that, we do have a section where there's some discussion about using En-ROADS with younger groups out there. I think probably the most popular age range that we see En-ROADS being used is in college settings, undergraduates, some with high schoolers too. But again, you want to take that time to make sure they're familiar with the different settings and explain the dynamics in a way that is accessible to them. And then, of course, beyond college, there are lots of settings in which En-ROADS is used with adults too. So it's by no means limited to students. Good question. Thanks.
And maybe I'll add one more point there. I saw a question, not exactly question, a comment there asking that if it can be run over several days of course, especially for classroom settings. So that is totally possible. Some of our facilitators have already tried that out, running En-ROADS workshop or game in the multiple course of days. So that is totally possible.
Yeah, definitely. Other questions that are out there?
Yeah, Ellie, I can actually see a lot of people asking about the translation, and in fact, some of our attendees were also expressing their interest for translation. So if you can elaborate on this.
Yeah, definitely translation is on our minds at Climate Interactive, and we are working to get, first off, I think our first step has been to get the materials for the climate action simulation translated. But we really hope in the next 6 months to be able to have a version of En-ROADS like what we're looking at here, translated into a different language so that you could use it if you're in China and maybe it's in Mandarin, or if you're somewhere else that it can be available. And our 𝐶Roads simulator, if you're familiar with that, already is available in several different languages. So I would say to email us if you are a translator or have the resources to get En-ROADS translated into a language that you work within. Do email us at support@climateinteractive.org. We would be interested in exploring those partnerships. A lot of the translation that has been done on Climate Interactive's tools previously has been thanks to volunteers. Some of you may be on the line right now, people who've taken the time to do the translation work for maybe their class or whatever, and then we've been able to turn around and make it available to everyone else for free. So I do hope to see more translations in the future. That's definitely on our mind, but good question. And that also reminds me, I do have another poll to run. So let me run the last poll, and I'm just curious here. So we're thinking about how does Climate Interactive show up in this world right now? It feels like so much is changing. And so I'm really curious to ask you, we just talked about translation, but what do you think Climate Interactive's priorities should be to deliver the maximum impact right now? Do you think it is on translating En-ROADS, or what about running another series of our training series to get people more familiar with the model dynamics and aspects like that? We could write more op-eds and share our analysis in papers, more things like what Beth Solomon is doing. Or should we add more detail into the food, land, and agriculture sector? Or is it just more extensive sharing of scenarios on social media? Yeah, we're just curious what your input is on what we should be up to and that kind of thing. And if you have some other ideas, feel free to write it into the questions box. And yeah, I'll give you all here a few more seconds to fill it in. Thanks for those of you all who are sticking around. Totally understand if you need to go. We are over the hour, and I'm happy to stick around a little bit longer, and we'll answer some more questions. Okay, let me close the poll, and here I'll share the results. So top result, sharing our analysis in papers and op-eds. We hear you, and that's great feedback to hear, and we'll think about, you know, what might be in store in that. But then really we see a lot of time. Some of you all see different things. You know, in second place there we have more detail on food, land, and agriculture. We have a team of modelers that is thinking about this and diving into that. So that's good to see. More trainings in there in the mix. Translations, like we said, we just talked about. Great, thank you all. Bindu, do you see another question out there that would be good to answer?
Yeah, I think we have covered most of the questions. So thanks to Linda and Cassandra who have been replying in that questions box. I just wanted to re-emphasize, I can see a lot of comments saying that people are planning to run their events, workshop or games. So if you are planning one, please do not forget to register your event. So that was what I wanted to re-emphasize. Plus, if there are any other questions which in case we missed out, feel free to send out or share your new ideas about translation or about anything that you would like to discuss at support@climateinteractive.org.
Great. Thank you all so much for joining today, for your participation and engagement. we're really excited to see your screenshots and pictures of you running your EnROADS online events in socially distant ways. And I hope you all are washing your hands and being safe out there. I know this is a tough time, and just really appreciate you all for your engagement and staying engaged on this topic. And you know, here we are. I think we have people joining us from many different countries. I know when people were joining, I saw names from Thailand and Hong Kong and the United States, and I think we had a few people in from Australia. So many of those time zones where there's still people awake, and our webinars earlier today had people from across Europe and beyond. So know that there are a bunch of other people out there like you wondering, how do we engage people on climate in this current moment? And thank you all for joining us today and for engaging in these questions. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks for joining. Bye.
Thank you, Ellie. Bye.